of our students and the children of our seniors so they can play a very important role in the decision-making process of our residents. Now, there's a lot of competition these days fighting for the attention of our consumer. So one of our goals in business strategies is to find unique ways to cut through this noise and attract people to our properties and websites where they will sign leases. To achieve this, we're creating innovative strategies for our residents to foster that sense of community, generate buzz, and establish our properties as social hubs. So we're focusing our efforts on creating educational, social, and lifestyle experiences as a way to grab the attention of our consumer and differentiate ourselves from the rest of the competition. At the same time, we believe that this can be a cost-efficient form of marketing, allowing us to reduce our advertising expense and payroll needed for outreach. These experiences serve as a powerful complement to our traditional advertising. So we're starting with our student portfolio to test out some concepts with the plan to roll out our successes where it makes sense across the senior platform. This is a great opportunity for our properties, and to meet it, we have sought out extraordinary partners who are leaders in their field. We are proud to be working alongside these partners in creating these dynamic experiences and developing the strategic advantage that allows a Kane property to stand out as a premier locale within our communities. While there are many groups out there who can build that beautiful resort-style rooftop deck along with all the great amenities that we see at our properties, there are few who can create that unique experience that we're focused on, that it factor that Al referenced earlier. Through our partnerships with Interscope Records, Zagster, Young Invincibles, Vengo, and Stand 4, we aim to create a comprehensive programmatic experience where the whole becomes much greater than the sum of its parts.
The size of the portfolio that we've amassed over the past 7+ years presents a compelling opportunity to partner with these companies in the music, bike sharing, and advocacy arenas, and it also allows us to create value for our residents, our partners, and our investors. Where other companies may be focused on a push strategy of passing out drink koozies and t-shirts, these partnerships allow us to focus on developing experiences, services, education, and the building of communities. Where our competitors may focus on dragging people from their routines on campus, we create an environment that pulls the student to us and is not easy to replicate. It is because of these partnerships that in one day, one of our residents can wake up, get dressed to the tune of a DJ they heard spin in the common area the night before, hop on a shared bike and ride to campus, and continue a dialogue that started at a Kane site, bringing it into the classroom instead of the other way around. When class is over, they can hop back on their shared bike and ride to that one-of-a-kind living experience that they've come to expect, and by night's end, renew their lease. Since its inception, Kane Real Estate has been a leader in the student housing market, and our group, in partnership with the colleagues that have joined us here today, is ensuring that we continue Al Rabel's tradition of staying well ahead of the marketplace. It is my great pleasure to introduce to you some of the partners that help in making a Kane asset a fabulous place to live. Tim Erickson is the co-founder and CEO of the bike sharing firm Zagster. Bike sharing, made famous by the City Bike program in New York City, has become an amenity that's sought out by millennials. Started in 2007, Zagster has grown to be the premier bike sharing service in the university and corporate campus space. Aaron Smith is the co-founder of the Young Invincibles, the largest youth advocacy group in the country. Through their efforts, the Young Invincibles were instrumental in shaping national legislation to allow for young adults to stay on their parents' insurance up to age 26. No small feat for a young organization. And last but certainly not least is Mark Flaherty, head of marketing at Interscope Records. Interscope is the premier record label in the country, and Mark and his team at Interscope work with some musicians you may have heard of, including U2, Lady Gaga, and Madonna. We're excited to have our partners with us today to talk about where we've been, and importantly, where we're going. Gentlemen, in your own words, why don't you take an opportunity to tell us what you do every day? Tim, tell us a little bit about Zagster.
Cool. Timothy Erickson, CEO of Zagster, and we are the world's only low-cost turnkey bike-sharing provider. So our customers are typically folks in the real estate space, universities, corporate campuses, and we provide everything they need to run a bike sharing program. So the student at a Kane property can get access to a bike by simply using their mobile phone. We're backed by some good investors, first investor in Zipcar, Bill Ford's, Ford Motor Car Companies, VC firms, investor in ours. Today we operate in 23 states, and happy to be here working with Kane.
Great, thank you. Aaron, tell us a little bit about the Young Invincibles.
Sure. So again, Aaron Smith, co-founder of Young Invincibles. Thank you for having me. Very excited to be here. So we are a national youth organization focusing on expanding economic opportunity for our generation. So when we talk about millennials, we're really talking about that 18 to 34-year-old demographic. We're very excited to work with Kane on what we call the Millennial Money Project, which is really about financial education for this generation. So you might have seen there was a recent Wall Street Journal story about a New York Fed report showing that more and more young people are moving back with their parents, in part because of the rise of student loan debt. Now, some might be surprised to know young people actually don't want to move in with their parents, for the most part. But they really are struggling to figure out how to manage their finances, and that's what the Millennial Money Project is all about. This weekend, I'm actually going to be going to UVA to go to one of the Kane properties there, and we're going to start to have this conversation with students about financial education. How do you manage your student loan debt? How do you deal with credit? How do you deal with savings? You know, how do you think about budgeting when you actually leave school? So we're incredibly excited about that. It's going to be a campus tour all around the country at some of the biggest campuses, going to the Kane properties. Wells Fargo is the big supporter of that campaign, and we're using the Kane properties, so it's a great opportunity.
Great. Mark, tell us a little bit about Interscope Records.
Let me just say for a second that I don't know that all the parents are excited about the kids living with them coming back either. I think they want to live the lifestyle that we saw at the Kane property with the car and the right. I'm Mark Flaherty. I'm head of marketing at Interscope Records. The company was founded by Jimmy Iovine, who some of you may have heard of recently. Sold his Beats headphones audio company to Apple in a very big deal. Beats was born out of the Interscope roster, really helping Jimmy to build that. So he's since moved on, but his spirit of entrepreneurship and his ability to spot talent lives on in our new president, John Janik. And you know, in terms of what we do, I mean, it would be sort of an understatement or oversimplification to say that we're a record company and we look for talent and we try to bring it to market. Obviously, that's what we do. But what sets us apart, I think, at Interscope is that our mission statement is to move culture and create community. There's no one here, anywhere really, of any age, who hasn't had that moment where music has hit them in a certain way. It's universal, doesn't matter. And what we try to do is find artists that have something to say about their world and what's happening, and put that out there in an honest way. And we create community. It's a rallying point for not just college kids, everybody.
Thank you, Mark. To give the audience some additional perspective, why did you pick up the phone when Kane Anderson called? We're a real estate private equity fund. You're a record label. It seems like a strange union.
My assistant called in sick that day, so no. On the contrary, I mean, I thought it was so. To me, it was so immediately organic. Right. At least for your college housing vertical, and I think for your senior housing vertical as well. We're trying to do the same things. This is my 30th year in the music business, and years ago, we did an extensive amount of marketing directly towards colleges, college campuses, early adopters, the most important segment. And over the years, that's drastically changed with the advent of technology and other things that have changed over the years. And so when we heard from you guys, I thought, wow, this is great. I can recreate what seems to be a no-brainer, a place that I can go and really hit my target audience and really find out what's important to them and how they're behaving and how they're integrating music even deeper into their life than they ever had before. So for me, it was very natural to have that conversation and very exciting possibilities.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Aaron, same question. Young Invincibles, you guys are a nonprofit organization. Clearly, we're for-profit. Why did it make sense?
Yeah, I think similarly, we want to be where students are. And Kane gives us access to thousands of students at some of the biggest campuses around the country, and a venue at every single one of these campuses to have the conversation about financial education, about financial management that we want to be having with students. And also, a starting point. We see this, for the Millennial Money Project as a beginning of that conversation. For our events, we're bringing in professors, we're bringing in folks from the school, and we're going to continue that conversation with students, but we couldn't do it without you guys.
Thanks.
And it's really an opportunity to create a distinguishing factor, not only a differentiating factor, but appeal to parents who are an important decision maker for us, and really create an environment that's a celebrated environment for its intellectualism and its fun. And Young Invincibles helps us accomplish that.
And finally, Tim, the connection with Zagster is more obvious, but can you please share your perspective?
Yeah, so we were actually really happy when Kane called because we had a background working in the multifamily space and the university space. And so we saw the value with working with multifamily properties like Related, where having bikes at a single property actually brought an ROI. It increased tenant retention, it made the tenants overall happier. At the end of the day, it's a low-cost, high-value amenity for the property. And on the university side, we work with some of the largest universities in the country like Yale and Duke, and it becomes an important part of the transportation mix on campus. And so when Kane Anderson called and allowed us to get into the universities at a private property and off-campus housing, this was a dream come true.
Thank you. So, we've been talking a lot about partnerships, and obviously a main driver for all of us is creating value. So can you share some details on what you're seeing with the Zagster-Kane partnership and what successes and trends we're seeing?
Yeah, so I think, just overall on the Kane properties, there's been a trend in the campus space where the campuses are making it really difficult or really discouraging students from bringing cars to campus. It's expensive to support cars on campus, infrastructure for parking and others is really expensive, and as schools become more urban centers, having alternative transportations options are really important. So at the Kane property, this is a perfect fit where students might be living a little off campus, they're close by, and it's an easy bike ride to get to and from. And so, the ROI to Kane here is that it attracts more students to the property, and they're typically more engaged because this is a form of transportation that they rely on to get to and from class. So who's going to renew their lease with another vendor or move to another property that may not have that sort of offering?
Interesting.
And we're seeing an exciting trend. Last night you saw kind of a mock-up of Fuse, a building we have at Purdue University. And we're seeing a higher renewal rate with our residents who use Zagster. And those who use Zagster that are not a resident, we're seeing a healthy lead generation list that we can go after. Because we know that they're familiar with our building, they're familiar with the Zagster product, and we've already started the conversation with them. So it's been compelling.
And to add to that, you didn't see it on the bikes last night, but generally we have the logos on the frame and on the basket, and that allows us to market on campus where access is often restricted. And so it provides value on multiple levels.
And we're also providing a heat map which allows the Kane properties to see where the residents are actually taking the bikes from and dropping them off, so they can see where are the hot spots around campus, where they should be marketing to, because this is where the students are going.
Right, so what we're trying to do is, pull people to our properties, and, with concerts where we're seeing a lot of success with that. Mark, would you mind sharing what you're seeing with our new concert series?
Yeah, we've done a couple of proof of concepts. One at the property in Eugene. At the actual property, we had an up-and-coming DJ. I think about 500 kids came out, so I think everybody was happy with the turnout. What we really want to do here is create a mechanism for kids to come from outside the properties, non-residents, to come in, be exposed, and to walk away and talk about, wow, that place is cool. You can play the amenity game, but that's something very special and you get word of mouth from that. We did another activation in the Tucson with the Tucson property off campus at the Rialto Theater. With your help in terms of promoting it on the campus, et cetera, and your access to the campus, which is very powerful, 1,000 kids came out to see an EDM artist named Artie, who's a very well-known DJ.
1,000 kids and one Frank Dumler.
Yes. And let me say, I was traveling, so I couldn't go, but my colleague Dave is here, who does a lot of our sports marketing and gaming, et cetera, and he sent me a snapshot and a note, and it was great, because Frank was right up front and in it, and man, it was really cool to see. Yeah.
He may have had the best time of anybody at the concert.
We would have picked up the tab to bail him out. We like Frank. So, but if I can, beyond the concerts, because it's not just about that.
Right.
There's a lot of things after all these years in music that I take for granted, and the value of some of those things is perceived value is so high. Mm-hmm. There's other activations we can do, whether it be listening parties for music that hasn't come out yet, whether it be we're always looking to tap young creatives, whether it be artists, videographers, etc. And so there's a crowdsourcing element to this with your residents that will allow you to give them the opportunity to get some experience and build their resume potentially with a company, an international company, well-known company like Interscope. And for us, rather than getting in the same rote path of overpaying directors for video shoots and artists for the art that we use, we can give young creatives a chance, and they're always more cutting edge, and they're always doing things differently. So I think there's a whole host of other activations in there as well, but could go on for a long time, as we have. There's a lot we can do.
Exciting stuff. Thank you.
Aaron, do you want to talk about partnership?
Oh, sure. And as a nonprofit, we obviously think about ROI in our own way.
Yeah.
As we look at the events that we're going to be doing together, we think about obviously the number of students that come to our events, both Kane residents, but also students from around the school. How many people we can reach through social media, how many we can reach when we do interviews with the campus radio station or the campus newspaper. We also think about the partnerships and the types of people we can bring to that Kane property. So, when we can bring business school professors and economics professors and school administrators and the head of the student government, that's really what it's doing, is creating sort of putting the central campus conversation at the Kane property around a topic of financial education that we care deeply about. So that's how we measure value.
Absolutely, and through each of the partnerships, we are creating a sense of place where the campus life is extended into our places, not just where people live, but where somebody might enjoy a concert. The bike sharing creates a central hub within the university center, and then of course educational programming within our space that's compelling and important to the student. These are all helping us accomplish becoming that hub.
Alex, I think it's important to know too, at least on the music side, we talked a little bit about it at dinner the other night, but this is customizable in terms of what we can bring per property. So if it happens to be a school that has a notable art program or a notable music program, we can bring engagements on a local level that speak to that student body, that really help send the message that Kane understands the students and what they're there for.
I mean, it's definitely a much more meaningful engagement. Like, we can hire students to stand on a street corner and pass out flyers and stop people and hope that they'll come and lease with us. But through these partners, we're able to offer something that they value, something special, to pull them to our properties, and then we have that discussion.
Yeah. Internally at Kane, we talk a lot about demographic shifts. When you guys think about the huge amount of millennials in the marketplace, and also kind of the graying of America, right, and a big wave of people entering the senior space, how are you guys thinking about this in your respective businesses? Aaron, if you wouldn't mind giving us your perspective.
Yeah, sure. And it's interesting. You all work with the two largest generations in U.S. history. I mean, the baby boomer generation, which is going to be aging into your properties, but then also the millennial generation, which is now the largest generation in U.S. history. Interestingly, we're seeing a huge amount of economic overlap between those two populations. So to give one example, we did a partnership with AARP where they called over 100,000 of their California members and said, if you want to get more information about signing your kids up to 26 on your plan, or your grandkids, join this conference call. And I was on a conference call with about 11,000 seniors in California, walking through the details, for their own information. And whether it's on healthcare, whether it's on student loans, we're seeing the parents and the grandparents, helping to support their kids and actually pay for college. Just the intersection between these two populations is huge.
It's interesting. And Mark, at Interscope Records, you guys just released an album with Lady Gaga and Tony Bennett, a convergence of old and new. Can you talk a little bit about both how you see the millennial set, but also kind of the graying of America?
Sure. On that particular project, what I really loved about it is that I think Gaga was known as one thing, and people misunderstood her a little bit and kind of downplayed her talent. So when she gets with someone like Tony Bennett, who I'm a huge fan of, it does a couple of things. It brings her young audience into what I consider to be some of the greatest music ever from any generation, and it's been a great vehicle for her to put a spotlight on her talent rather than some of the other things that she gets a spotlight for. I almost wore a meat dress. And then for Tony, Tony is he's the oldest person to ever have a #1 album on the Billboard charts. He's an amazing guy. He's been a mentor to her. And the reason for that is I think there's a lot of crossover between the generations. I really do. I think there is a period of time in there where you really felt the gap, and I really feel like some of the values that are coming back align them well. And also it unites people in their love of music. You've got young kids running around listening to classic copyrights, and then you've got the graying folks who love the fact that they can listen to something with their kids, basically. So there's a lot of convergence happening.
And from the videos we saw earlier today, there is it looks like a shared desire for the experiential living. Can you tell us a little bit about Verve, which is also under the Universal Music Group?
As we started having conversations and doing some proof of concept events, during that early period, we became strategic partners with Verve. That's David Foster, for anyone that knows him, a very successful producer. His label and us are working together. They have talent such as Barry Manilow, Rod Stewart, Sarah McLachlan, on and on, some legendary artists. And I immediately hooked up Mike, who runs Verve, with these guys because I thought, well, how great would it be? My vision was they released a Donny Osmond record, and I thought, wow, for Donny Osmond to walk into one of your senior living properties, you watch every 65-year-old turn into a 13-year-old girl again, and it's great, and it's magic, and something happens there, and so I think there's going to be a lot of potential activations there with Mike as well. So
okay, great. Yeah. And Tim, we have a question that's come in, but before we address the question, we'd love to hear from you about the Millennial set. I think they've grown accustomed to the City Bike program in New York City. If they haven't experienced it, they've probably read about it. And this has become an amenity that they've grown to expect. How do you track that market, and do you see opportunity in the senior space?
Yeah, I think there's a massive opportunity here, and the rate of using bicycle as a form of transportation has doubled in the last 10 years. To put it in perspective, imagine if there was double the amount of cars on the road, none of us would have made it on time to the meeting today. And bicycling is the only form of transportation that can support that sort of growth. And that's mainly due to the two demographics that we're talking about here. You have the millennials who are looking for alternative transportation options. They're generally in more dense urban areas where bicycling makes sense. And then we're seeing on the older generation that bicycling is actually becoming the new golf. You have people spending thousands of dollars on road bikes, dressing up and getting with their friends on Saturday morning and going for long bike rides. The one thing that both of those groups have in common is they don't want to deal with the hassles of owning, maintaining, or storing a bicycle. And that's really where Zagster comes in.
Interesting. And then can you talk about your prototype for a second?
Yeah, so we're also in the senior housing space. We're working with Kane on developing a tricycle that can be automatically rented so that we can put these on the senior living properties. So we're able to support kids at our hotel properties with children's bikes to older folks with tricycles as well.
A much safer solution for the space. And there's a question that's come in about the profitability of bike sharing. And along the City Bike program in New York City, there's been a lot of press about its lack of profitability. The question that came in is, knowing that these challenges exist in the space, how do you mitigate that and effectively keep yourself afloat?
Sure. So we are the only venture capital-backed bike sharing company in the world, and this is because we developed a lean operating model for bike sharing. So we focus in on smaller communities like Cleveland or Yale University or Duke University in Durham, and focus on operating those smaller programs a lot better. When you get into large cities like New York, the infrastructure and the requirements to operate the program are exponentially more. And the way I always equate it is, just because New York City decides to put in a whole bunch of subways doesn't mean that New Haven, Connecticut, where Yale is, needs to have the same. And so we really focus in on those communities that don't need that heavy infrastructure, driving down the costs and allowing us to operate programs around the country.
Okay, great. Similar to the demographic shift question, we have a Generation Z that are those children who are going to be 18 years old here in a couple of years, and they're nipping at the heels of the Millennial set. I was wondering, from your vantage points, respectively, how are you guys viewing that younger generation? And Mark, why don't we start with you?
Sure. I really like what they're standing for. Again, having done this for a long time, what I appreciate about them is it's a return to the authentic for them. As it pertains to music, it's about musicality matters, being the master of your craft matters, being able to play your instrument matters. These are things that really went away for a while, as we all know, and much to probably everybody's chagrin. So they are more talented, they're more interested in the world, and they have more to say and want to hear more lyrically from artists. They're deeper. They're about environmentalism. They're about all the causes that you work with. And one thing we're finding really interesting, and also is welcome to me, is that though they're very engaged on social media, they're the first ones, I think, who are starting to put it in its place in terms of balance. We signed an act recently called Bahari, which is a partnership with Simon Fuller, who started American Idol. They're 3 young girls, 16, 17 or so. And a big part of their message is put the phone down. Go out and be with your friends. Don't just stare at that phone, or don't go out to dinner with your friends and stare at the phone and nobody says a word to each other, which we've all seen. And so it's, as a father, it's great to see it's great to see some of that returning. I have a lot of respect for them, and in a very positive way, they're embracing themselves. They're not kind of buying into the stereotypes of beauty or talent, or in fact they're pushing back hard, which I think is very healthy and very good. So I'm excited about the kind of music we're able to put out there now, be involved with back in the day.
So is there a new approach as to how you reach this generation? Is it just concerts or?
Well, I mean, it's honestly, it's fairly easy for us because Interscope has never been about piecing talent together and finding someone who looked right and then putting them with the right music. We look for real artists who have something to say, and we help them get that out and magnify it, we scale it. And so anybody we get into business with is already coming from an authentic, organic place, and we try to very much to keep it that way.
Great. And Aaron, similarly, Gen Z, they're going to be your clients as well pretty soon. How are you thinking about them?
Well, I agree a lot with what Mark said about this being an interesting generation in terms of their interest in sort of the authentic, and there's a lot of skepticism out there, I think, about being sold something, and so that affects everything that we do, and as we think about engaging them. This is also the most diverse generation in U.S. history. It's a increasingly entrepreneurial generation in terms of, I think this generation is very interested in having an impact on the world, but they see that they can do that in a lot of different ways, not just sort of the traditional nonprofit sector, but through entrepreneurship. So I think those are very positive trends. I would say on the negative side, we see what I would consider sort of an undue level of optimism among a lot of young people who think that somehow that it's going to work out in terms of their sort of economic future, and so we have to be a little bit of the cautionary. It's actually going to be challenging when you leave school. You're going to have to think about it and sort of make your plan, and that's what our work is all about.
Interesting.
My pleasure.
And Tim, these are kids who are fresh out of tricycles. They'll get into tricycles in many, many years. But how are you looking at the Gen Z set?
Yeah, I think, and Bill Ford, one of our investors, would agree with this. The car is no longer king. The next generation is really thinking about the best way to get from point A to point B. And this is starting when they're going into university. A lot of students are not able to bring cars to their campus anymore. They're not able to use that traditional form of transportation, so they're looking for better, more efficient, easier ways to get around. And bicycling is part of that, and as that generation grows up, and if trends persist, they're going to stay in these urban environments, and the bicycle is going to be the best way to get around.
Okay, great. We've got a question from the audience. The idea of scaling concerts across the nation is not the easiest thing to do. Mark, can you tell us a little bit about what else we're doing in the music space to kind of reinforce Interscope in the minds of the students?
Yeah, to your point about scaling concerts, there's a whole segment of our business agents who handle that, and they understandably get a little prickly if you're bumping into their territory and having the artist perform on a promotional level after they've reached a certain level of success. It makes perfect sense given how robust the touring business is these days. So for us, there's so many things that we do in a day that will have value to a Kane resident. Some of the activations are simply, if we have an artist actually coming through town on tour, we can have set up exclusive meet and greets for Kane residents. And how you contest that internally would be, something that you guys handle, but the ability for someone to go and meet, the Imagine Dragons or to meet One Republic, and then go back to your property and talk about that and say, hey, because I'm a resident here, I'm getting this kind of access. The other thing that we've done a bit of, and I want to explore more, is, music schools are full of kids who are struggling to figure out how to make a living in this new environment. It's been a really challenging decade for music business. You've got art students in art schools who are trying to figure out how to make a living as well. And so what we've done in a few instances, and like to do here, is bring a successful artist into a school or into a Kane property, not just to perform, but to really do a Q&A and talk to these kids about, similar to what you're doing, to say, here's the realities of what you want to do, so be prepared and work hard, and you can get where we are. Other things, what I consider low-hanging fruit, but I know from experience that kids love is signed lithographs, things like this, VIP experiences to festivals like Coachella and South by Southwest, and listening sessions, access to music. These are things, despite the troubles that the music business has had, music is even more a part of kids' lives today, I think, than it's been in the past. And certain sectors are very, very robust. So I think there's about 1 million things we can do outside of what we already do every day, and including you in that, and things that we can do on site.
Sky's the limit.
Pretty much.
Great.
Yeah.
We're running out of time, but we have one last question for the panelists, and that is, we're in the early stages of our relationship with each of these groups, and I wanted to ask you guys from your perspective, at this point, when you think about a Kane partnership at the 5-year timeline or the 10-year timeline, how are you guys thinking about it? How do you think it will grow? And we'd love to start with you.
Sure. I think we're seeing now on some of our properties is that there's value for Kane to launch a bike sharing program at that campus, at that property. But what we're starting to see is that by having a bike sharing program on that campus, now the university wants to get involved. And we're starting to see this at properties like the Fuse, where Purdue University really wants to bring a bike sharing program to campus. And so what's really unique about this relationship is that there's value to just launch it at an individual asset, but now we can expand that bike sharing program throughout the entire campus, and Kane Anderson gets credit for helping start that program. And so, longer down the road, we envision becoming the zip car of the bike sharing industry, where we'd be at a majority of campuses around the country, and that bike sharing would be an important part of that transportation mix.
Fantastic. And that's one of the things that we're seeing is if Purdue University decides to adopt Zagster, our property, the Fuse, is going to be a de facto campus site, and kids are going to be used to going and checking out these bikes, and it's going to be a wonderful extension that's going to help reinforce our property.
Absolutely.
Aaron?
Yeah, so we're incredibly excited about the partnership. I think it starts with this Millennial Money project, but I think the potential is really huge. And for us, like we've said, it's about creating a center point of sort of campus life and intellectual conversation around some of the economic issues that we're talking about. I could imagine going beyond what we're doing now to having even financial planning services or financial education services, like one-on-one with students. I think that would provide huge value, and obviously I think a lot of schools are actually not doing nearly enough to prepare students, for example, for how they're going to pay off their student loans when they get out. So I think there's tons of potential, but again, it's about sort of creating that center of campus life, a place that students really want to be.
Okay, great. And Mark, how are you seeing it grow?
I want to be part of bringing back college marketing the way that I knew it when I started. It seems, silly to me that that's not necessarily been a core part of what we do over the, last decade or so. Go where they are, give them what they want, and make it quality and be honest about it. And so for me, it's about access. It's also about, and we've had some separate discussions together about the synergies between our companies and the things that we could do together. We've always been, as an industry, part of the community. Community rallies around us, so we want to try and work with the other partners as well. And I've said to both of you candidly, I think that for Kane, separate from what you're doing with us, there's a business within a business here. There isn't a brand out there, and if you curate it properly and you're smart about it, that wouldn't want access in this way, in where they live, in the ways that they live. It's a no-brainer.
Great. Well.